what are some of the main terms of research methods. Okay, so we reviewed correlation, variables, hypothesis, reliability, and validity. Okay, which is essentially what leads us to this point, up to this point, where we are going to begin our experimental method, which is the base of the whole psychology course. Now let's start with the case study. What are cases study? Case studies are investigations of a single person, group, event, or community. Okay, and sometimes it's most of the times are about events and single person. Why do we have those things? Those help us because information, as it says here, is mainly biographical and relates to events in the individual's past. This is very useful because it provides a description of the behavior of the community or of someone. Okay. So how do we gather the data? From interviews and other sources such as observation. Okay. Especially interviews and observation. Yeah, that might be it. It says that it is not itself a research method, but researchers select methods of data collection and analysis that will generate material suitable for case studies. Okay, as the image implies, in a case study is where we ask as many questions about the event or the person that we are researching or gathering data from. Okay, this helps us to get a specific insight on one person or event views as a starting point to draw a larger experiment or larger research. As example, we have the bottom phobia of Saavedra and Silverman. If you remember, they studied one specific case of phobia, and then they threw their hypothesis as the phobia not being only fear but disgust as well. So case studies are a good starting point and helps us to explore new answers to different phenomena. So as a starting point, that often leads us to a bigger experimentation process, okay, or to a bigger research. And we try to apply the case studies findings to developing a new strategy for gathering more data in the future. Okay, so that's a case study. We have reviewed case studies in the past. Yes, we will continue to do so. Okay, and they are very useful. So what are the strengths then? It provides detailed, rich qualitative information. Qualitative because qualitative is opinions, views, perspectives, right? So it provides insight for further research, yes, we have stated, yeah, to help us build or build different instruments for following research, for following experiments. And it also permits investigation of otherwise impractical or unethical situations. Yeah, remember that, for example, for psychologists, when there is experimentation in the middle, you cannot do a lot of the things that in therapy you would be able to do so. Okay, for example, in therapy, you can be very close to the patient in order to gather as much data as possible and to be inside their center of privacy. Of course, you cannot divulge it, but you can be inside his privacy center. And in an experiment or research, where in an experimentation stance, this is considered unethical, okay? As of the limitations of the case study, you can generalize the results to the wider population. Yeah, that's true. If one case study, for example, one phenomenon, you have the hypothesis of that phenomenon and it occurs to be true, you cannot say that your hypothesis is true for the entire population. No, because when you have one case study, this case study has its own particular qualities, okay, characteristics, so it can be generalized. Also, researcher's own subjective feeling may influence the case study. Yeah, and in many cases, for example, in patients, not only in psychology, but in psychiatry or even in medicine, the researcher or the physician or the doctor or the psychologist gets sometimes too involved in the patient's life, in the patient's problems. So that may result in a bias of the results gathered. So this is a very concerning point in the case study. Okay, it's difficult to replicate. It's almost impossible to replicate because as we are studying one specific phenomenon, one event, one person, its characteristics can be replicated up to 100%. Okay, so your hypothesis has some degree to being wrong, and then the solutions that you provide to the case study, they may not apply all the time. Okay, and it's time consuming, of course, because you're spending your time while you're in observation and having interviews. Okay, it's time consuming. As an example, we have the Saavedra and Silverman, the phobia button that we have studied before. I have a question. Can you see the words here clearly, or should I zoom in? Oh yeah, there's that. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, let's continue then. We have an interview. Okay, we're going to review two very similar tools for gathering data, which are the interview and the questionnaires, but we should not mix them. Okay, those have very specific characteristics which make them different to one another. For example, the interview is very social, has a very social component. Okay, as you see in the image, the person taking notes is not only taking notes, and many times the interviewer or the researcher doesn't even look or don't even look at the book or at the papers or what they are taking notes about. And they tend to look into the eyes of the interviewee, and there they show their social empathy and support. Okay, this helps to develop a better interview most of the time because of the rapport, of the rapport factor. Remember, rapport is where the person in front of you that you're interviewing feels comfortable enough to share their thoughts, feelings, and to be true with you. Okay. So we have also strengths and limitations for this interview. We have a structured interview. We have an unstructured interview and a group interview. We're going to be revising the three of them. Okay. In the structured interview, it is easy to replicate as a fixed set of closed questions are used, which are easy to quantify. This means it is easy to test for reliability. Okay. Remember, reliability was when your instrument is able to measure the same thing over and over again. Okay, it can be replicated. Okay, and it is easy to replicate because you have a structured set of questions and a logical order to them. For example, you first ask for name, gender, age, and then you move on to what do you think about this and that, and why, and why, and why. Okay, that's a structured interview. And it's fairly quick to conduct. A structured interview may take 30 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on the number of questions that you have, but a 15-question interview or a 10-question interview may take 30 minutes approximately, sometimes even more. Okay. And the limitations about it are that structured interviews are not flexible yet, because as they have a specific number of questions, then you cannot ask, in many cases, a question over an answer. Okay, you have those questions and you cannot move from the script, and that's why they are called a structured interview. And you cannot say as a researcher that, okay, but I saw the opportunity and then I took a deviation from the path and I didn't follow it, then that invalidates your structured interview. Okay. And then the answers from structured interviews lack detail, as only closed questions are asked, which generates quantitative data. That is, of course, when they say yes and no. But remember that interviews may deviate sometimes and to become unstructured interviews to gather more qualitative data. Okay. Yep. Remember that interviews have a social component linked to it. Now, where is this unstructured interview? Okay. In a structured interview, or sometimes a mixed interview, they may have some pre-armed questions, but they do not follow the whole pre-armed question. Okay, it's like they are flexible, as questions can be adapted and changed depending on the respondent's answers. So we have questions over answers, and it has increased validity because it gives the interviewer the opportunity to probe for a deeper understanding. Yep. So it measures what we needed to measure. Okay, and one second. And it helps us understand deeply the interviewee's thoughts, okay, their perceptions.
Yeah.
Okay, as for the limitations, we have that unstructured interview are time and resource consuming. Yep. 10 or 15 questions may take you an hour, more than an hour. And employing and training interviewers is expensive. Remember to conduct a research about a target population. It has to be somehow the 10% of its entire population. And so if you want to make a research about the target population of 300 and you're going to interview 30 people, you're not going to do it on your own. You're going to need trained people, and that trained people cost money. If you want to train properly and structured with an unstructured interview, like 30 people, it's going to take about an hour each, and an hour of one professional is somehow expensive. Okay, just give me 1 second, and I need to check something. It's recording. Sorry, I thought it wasn't recording. Okay, now let's go to the group interview, which is similar to the unstructured interview. Remember that that we have more quantitative data in the structured and qualitative data in unstructured, and then we have the group interview. We find as a strength they generate qualitative data as well as the unstructured interview. They have increased validity because it gives the interviewer the opportunity to probe for a deeper understanding, as well as the interview that we saw before. Okay, remember the difference between validity and reliability. Validity is that your instrument in this case is measuring what you want it to measure. Okay, it has increased validity, so it measures what you need to measure because you can ask questions over answers. Yeah, in this case, the privacy is not guaranteed because as you have a group of people, you may not divulge the information of one of your participants, but another person might. Okay, this is less reliable and difficult to repeat. Yep. When you ask questions over answers, yeah, as not all people are giving the same answers, you cannot replicate it. Sometimes it lacks validity as participants may lie. Yep, this is the only factor, the only limitation that doesn't repeat in the interview, which is individual and it's unstructured. Yep. In order to not be seen as weak or something they don't want to be perceived as, the participants may lie. Okay. And we have the questionnaire. As you see, the two images are very different. In this case, the interviewer is this one without taking notes, not taking notes, and then the participants are these three people. This lacks of a social component after he may be introduced, and he says, hey, can you cooperate with this questionnaire? And it's going to take about 2 to 5 minutes. And he has to be very polite to this, to get participants to do it. And then he hands the papers to the participants, and then that's it. Okay, that's the only social component here. It has no other thing as rapport as an interview. So it is very cold, as you can see. But it has also some strengths and limitations, which we are going to see in the future. Okay, we have 2 types of questionnaires. We can have closed questions, open questions, and mixed questionnaires. Okay, remember that its own purpose is for gathering information from respondents as fast as possible. Okay, questionnaires, remember, is a piece of paper where participants on their own may write their answers, and then that's it. Okay, and most of the times in questionnaires you have you respect anonymity of the participants. Okay, we have closed questions where you get large data at a low amount of cost, and open questions with rich qualitative data. Okay, the closed questions are easily converted to quantitative data. Yes, and even when you don't have closed question, when you apply the Likert scale, you can easily convert that also to quantitative data, and then you can make statistics out of it. Remember that quantitative data's main strength, main advantage is so you can be able to draw graphs and to explore statistics of your results. So this is very valuable. And questions are standardized. What does this mean? That questions have to be, you can apply these types of questions to your environment or to your population, or to your sample population in this case. The questions need to be modified in some cases so a larger group of people can understand them. That means standardized. Okay, that this has been proven. When we have open questions in questionnaires, we have rich qualitative data. Yeah, that helps us in some cases in order to understand different opinions, but it's rather expensive and time consuming. Okay, because if you have a 10 question questionnaire in closed question and a 10 question questionnaire with open questions, the 10 closed question is going to take you 5 minutes, and the open questions it's going to take you half an hour probably. Okay, so it's almost 3 times as more time consuming. Okay, it's not suitable for all respondents, yes, because in open questions many of the participants, if you have 30, 50 or 100 participants, many of the participants will not answer all the questions, which in some cases may make invalid your own instrument. So you have to be very careful with questionnaires in open questions. And also we have mixed questionnaires, which combine these 2 types of questionnaires. And also you have to be very careful with the variables that you're measuring, because when you mix them, yeah, your results or your conclusions of your experiment may vary greatly. Okay. So now, before we move to this part, which is very important, I want to know if you have any questions regarding questionnaires, interviews, or study cases. You can type if you don't want to speak, people. Do you have any questions?
Teacher, yo tengo una pregunta.
Yep.
¿Por qué se supone que no van a responder todos en open questions?
Okay. You have 10 pre-planned questions, any question, okay? And remember that questionnaires are often on the spot, okay? So that's why you may encounter some of the participants who are unprepared to do all of the questions. It depends on your instrument, actually. Esto depende mucho del nivel cultural o del nivel social al que tú estés encuestando. Recuerden que los cuestionarios son muchas veces usados en la calle para recolectar datos bastante rápido, ¿no? Ese es su lado positivo de los cuestionarios, que son relativamente más rápidos que las entrevistas y te generan datos mucho más rápido. Pero sin embargo, cuando haces open questions, hay personas que temen incluso a responder todas las preguntas, entonces las dejan en blanco. ¿Ok? Y hay personas que son incapaces de responder por falta de conocimientos o por falta de preparación. Ahora, eso solamente es una posibilidad. Si ustedes preparan un instrumento de cuestionario, yo les aseguro que la totalidad de personas no va a responder todas las respuestas cuando son open questions. Yo ya lo he hecho varias veces y se tienen que invalidar muchas preguntas. Es decir, yo recuerdo que hace 3 años, 4 años, hice un estudio en donde generé un instrumento de preguntas abiertas, mezclado, era mezclado. Eran 10 preguntas cerradas y 5 creo abiertas. Y como el 25% de las personas no respondía todo lo que eran las preguntas abiertas. ¿Ok? Entonces, terminé por desestimar todo el lado de preguntas abiertas, entonces solamente me quedé con las cerradas, ¿no?
Okay. Thank you, teacher.
Okay. Any other question? No? Okay. So, moving on. We have the experimental method. Yeah, this is the juicy part of researching. Okay, we have the lab experiment. Remember, one of the strengths or one of the qualities of the lab experiment is that the researcher can control most of the variables that there are. Okay, so we have the strengths and limitations of the lab experiment. A lab experiment is easier to replicate because a standardized procedure is used, one with a logical order, and it can be redone with a similar group of people. Okay, and they allow for precise control of extraneous and independent variables. Yeah, this is stated this way, but you may lose some of the extraneous variable as they are somehow, and most of the times not even seen, not even considered until after the experiment. One very good example of the experimental method is the Milgram study of obedience, or even the Loftus of the car crash study experiment, where they made a group of people see a car crash, 7 videos of car crashing, and then they asked questions with a questionnaire, right, in order to build the statistics. Because in this particular case of the lab experiment of Palmer, Loftus and Palmer, they needed the statistics, the quantitative data. So this experiment made the researchers able to control most of the variables that there were, but they have some limitations as well. They may produce a natural behavior that does not reflect real life. Yep. Yeah, for example, in the Milgram's case study, they controlled almost every variable that there was, and the pressure they put into the person in the experiment of obedience, it is, well, unnatural in a real environment, right? So the money, the pressure of the doctor with a rope inside the experimentation room may have influenced the behavior of course, it has influenced the behavior of the participant. Okay. Other of the limitations is that demand characteristics or experimental effects may bias the results and become confounding variables. Yep. Remember that confounding variables and extraneous variables are similar. Okay. Confounding variables are variables that that have an effect on the experiment, and we do not foresee it. We cannot foresee it. We cannot control it, or we didn't notice them until after the experiment. And the demand characteristics are the variables that we modify, one control variable that may lead the participant to know what do I want to do with it. So it changes the behavior of the participant. Esta parte hay que entenderla bien, porque es una limitación bastante fuerte del experimento de laboratorio. Las demand characteristics son esas pistas, esos clues que tiene el participante para saber qué es lo que quiere el investigador, y entonces desvía su conducta hacia otro lado, ¿no? Para él no sentirse como un conejillo de indias, por así decir, incluso cuando él está comprometido en cumplir el experimento. ¿Ok? Todos estos indicios que le den al participante de que esto es un experimento para memoria, por ejemplo, y él se da cuenta de que no es memoria, sino está en el de obediencia de Milgram, por ejemplo, van a modificar su comportamiento. Y por tanto, los resultados de ese caso en específico de ese experimento no van a ser válidos, ¿no? That's demand characteristics. Or experimental effects. Experimental effects means when the experimenter gets too involved in the research with the participants. Okay, this cannot happen as well. These three things, okay? And become confounding variables, of course, because we cannot control it in a very precise way, or we see it too long after the experiment has been done, okay? This is a lab experiment. As examples, we have the Milgram experiment and the Palmer and the Loftus car crash experiment. Okay, now we have a field experiment. This is very interesting because this is one almost natural experiment, but the researcher modifies the natural environment of the participants without them noticing it. So we have similar to real life experiences circumstances. So we have similar or behavior of the participants, which is very close to a real life scenario, right? And as an example, we have the Hodges and Tizard experiment, where the nurses were instructed by someone on the phone to administer one specific pharmaceutical product to the patients without them knowing what it was, just following orders, right? So it has also strengths and weaknesses. Okay, we have as strength, which is the field experiment is more likely to reflect real life because of its natural setting. Yeah, because some of the times we don't even tell the participants they are being watched, observed, or tested or they are being part of one experiment. In the strengths, there is less likelihood of demand characteristics affecting the results. Yeah, because we have no experimenters in the room, in the field, so they don't get many clues. They think they are in a natural environment. They think they are in a, well, they don't know they are being researched. This is where the whole social experiment thing begins, right? In the field experiment. Also, it has its limitations, where there are less control over extraneous variables that might bias the result. Yep, extraneous variables are variables that we have not taken care of, we cannot control. So that's one limitation. That's actually the only limitation we can get, but remember that we cannot have extraneous variables controlled and also a similar natural environment setting. So these two can never go together, okay? It's one or the other. And as we said, it's the Hodges and Tizard example, if you want to review it. And we have a natural experiment where the researcher is a mere observer, right? He only watches, he only sees things from afar. It has also its strengths, which is the behavior in a natural experiment is more likely to reflect real life because of its natural setting. Yeah, it's almost 100% natural because other than the gathering data through sometimes questionnaires or surveys, you have no contact with no the family, no the the participant. Okay, less likelihood of the main characteristics affecting the results. Yep, of course. 1 second. Yeah. Also, as the research has no contact with the participant, which is a mere observer, he cannot affect the results of the research. Can be used in situations in which it would be unethical, unacceptable to manipulate the independent variable. Yeah, of course, because okay. So how do you get your independent variable then? You select one specific group of people with the characteristics that you require. Okay. One example is the here it was the Hodges and Tizard experiment. Yeah, I forgot. I mixed the two experiments. Okay. I'm going to take notes. This is the field experiment of the nurse. Is the whole thing. If you want to review it as a nurse, and here is the Hodges and Tizard. What did they do here? They selected a group of orphan people and saw how they adapted to their foster families in a period of 5 or 10 years, in a large period of time. So it was a longitudinal experiment. Okay, so how did they measure that? They had their interviews with some members of the foster families and people around their environment to see how they adapted or they showed effect to the people around them. So how did they control the independent variable? It's not up to them to control it because they selected one specific group of people who had the characteristics they needed to measure. Okay, they needed. So that's why in a natural experiment, it reflects almost entirely a real life scenario. And you control no variable. Okay, you have no control over extraneous variables or any of the variables. Okay, one of the strongest limitations of a natural experiment is this one, which are in some cases very expensive and time consuming than lab experiments. A natural experiment may take years to complete, okay, especially when they are longitudinal. If you research longitudinal experiments right now, you may see that there are even a 50-year research being conducted, okay, 70-year research, even more because it's surpassed in the same university from generation to generation. Yeah, it helps us because it draws a line of prediction. Remember that was why correlation helps us as well. It draws a line of prediction to see how the future may go. Okay, I'm going to restart the meeting, so please hold and reconnect quickly, please, because I didn't take the attendance.